Welcome back, my friends. It's Smoking and Toasting. It's show number 152. We are all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We're brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant, 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, and in the shops at Clear Fork in Fort Worth. So, AB InBev, who have,
those
become
crazy guys,
those wacky, those wacky guys that like to have it both ways. They like to go after the craft beer consumer by buying up craft breweries across the country, and they like to insult the craft brewery, the craft brew
buy
aficionado.
Beer for the many,
right?
Put him in the dungeon,
dilly my ass. Yeah. Anyway, they've got an interesting thing in front of them now, because they actually own a portion of what's called the Craft Brew Alliance, and this is not all of the craft breweries that they purchased, like Goose Island and Carbach and some of the others. This is the Craft Brew Alliance, which is a collective of a number of beers. And they own shares in this, but apparently they are rapidly approaching the deadline where they will likely buy the rest of the shares. I guess they have coming up is the deadline after which they won't have the right to outright purchase the rest of the shares.
So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
AB InBev is poised to own the Craft Beer Alliance.
Yeah. Check this out. If this purchase goes down, which most market experts are predicting that it will, and it'll be very soon, within the next 2 weeks, AB InBev, in addition to owning Goose Island and Wicked Weed and Carbach and Elysian and the number of other breweries that they've already purchased, they will also now own Kona out of Hawaii, Widmer Brothers out of Oregon, Red Hook out of Washington State and New Hampshire, Wynwood Brewing out of Florida, Cisco Brewers out of Massachusetts, and Appalachian Mountain Brewery out of North Carolina, as well as Omission, the ones who do the gluten-free beers. All of these are part of the Craft Brew Alliance. AB InBev has until, I said 2 weeks, it's not even that long. They have 2 days from today, the day we're doing the show, until the 24th, to make a decision on a predetermined stock buyout. They already own just a little over 31%.
Wow.
Of CBA. So this is almost certain to happen.
All your beer are belong to us.
It's totally true. It's totally true. It's I don't know. I'm torn. I'm a capitalist at heart. I believe in I believe in the rights of these guys to go out and form their breweries and do great stuff and sell out, take the golden ticket. I don't have a problem with that at its heart. But there's also this other part of me that wants to rage against the machine. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the craft. I mean, part of the pitch and part of the love of. I mean, I worked in tap houses when I was 17. Red Hook, Widmer. I mean, these guys are about sticking it to the man.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Red Hook is, I remember from when I lived up in the Boston area, because they had, in addition to being from, I think, Washington State originally, they also opened up a second brewery in New Hampshire. And so we would get Red Hook stuff all the time. Their ESB.
That's the one.
One of the best on the market. It's just fantastic.
And there are very few ESBs made.
That's right. It's not a style like IPA that everybody makes 7 of them.
A lot of those breweries that you talked about, Kona, Widmer, Red Hook, they introduced craft beer
to their states. Absolutely true.
And ESB, I mean, people didn't know what extra special bitter was.
Right.
Before them.
Right. And I don't know, there's something
Fuller's
about
was
it.
One of the only ones that was actually even making an ESB.
Right. That's right. There's something about it that just makes me get a knot in my stomach. I have to admit. I don't know. This is tough.
Well, no, I get it. You know what? Start your brewery, sell it out, whatever. And I have no problems with that. I just think that the fact that AB InBev is just swooping them all up so that they can make more money.
Don't you have enough already?
They're crappy beer.
Right.
You know, and hey, whatever, they're going to make their money, so it's up to the consumer. The other problem I have too is the underhanded, like they don't put AB InBev on there.
No, of course not.
You know,
No, of course
except
not.
for Crawford Bach here in Houston, by the way, which is surrounded by Bud Light in my display at the grocery store.
Oh,
It's
is it really?
It's like 7 doors of Bud Light Blue, and in the middle of it is all Crawford Bach.
Dude, if you were shopping at a grocery store that has 7 doors of Bud Light Blue,
That's crazy.
You need another grocery store.
I totally do.
That's
I
just
totally
all
do.
I'm
It's
telling you,
absolutely
because
crazy.
that's wrong.
Like,
That's just wrong.
I try and take a picture of it next time if I think about it.
Yeah.
But I just find it amazing that like we said at the beginning of this is a company that makes fun of the craft beer drinker.
Right.
Because it has flavor and it's not
That's
for
what
the
the
many.
whole dilly thing was about. That whole thing, which they, when they realized that they had something that kind of caught on a little bit, they then like drove it into the ground.
Absolutely.
But the whole purpose of it, you remember, what was it, like
For the
2
many.
years ago when we came on the show and talked about it the first time? It's like, I can't believe this. They just bought one of the biggest and most influential craft breweries in our town, not to mention all these others, and now they're making fun of you. Like, I don't get it, but I do get it. It's a marketing thing. But I don't have to like it.
You know what they're doing is they're separating themselves as if they're a different
Right.
a different company.
Right.
And I would say a different brand, and it is true they're a different brand because a company can have many brands. But why would you alienate other people to your company by making fun of your other brands
Right.
to the people who drink this brand?
Well,
I think the other thing that's happening too, and I've mentioned this before, is the homogenized drinking category, meaning I drink the same thing every day,
Right.
day in,
Yeah,
day out.
every
All
time
I
I
do is I
drink,
go
yeah.
down and I buy my 12-pack of Bud Light, and I drink that. And then I go down and I buy another 12-pack of Bud Light. And that's all I ever drink. That's all that's ever in my cooler. I think that there's a lot of people that are breaking away from that. That was
100%. That's why they're buying them up, because they're cutting into their
Yeah.
profits.
Yeah, when they start cutting into that 5% of the market share that they didn't have,
right.
I just think it sucks, and I love the fact that people are wanting to try all these other things. But here's the deception part now. Now AB InBev owns all these, and if you think AB InBev is not influencing those breweries in their ingredients and other things like that, then you are sadly mistaken. Because do you think that big company's going to come in and be like, nah, just keep doing what you're doing. We're not changing anything.
Yeah, big companies always do that.
Yeah,
when they
right.
take over.
I don't
Yeah.
believe that even for a minute. And so now they're selling craft beer made by a macro brew,
Right.
and a lot of times in the same kettles as, or the same barrels and everything as the same place as the macro brews. And they're selling it without saying that we're part of this macro brew company. I mean,
Yeah.
you may know that if you dig in, but it certainly doesn't say it on the label.
And if you are a craft beer consumer, if you're someone who loves great craft beer, it really is a give and take. I'll give you a perfect example. I can now get good news. I can now get a Goose Island IPA if I go to a concert at NRG Stadium, like the Rolling Stones show that I went to, right?
Yeah.
Bad news. Goose Island IPA isn't as good as it used to be. It's just not. I'm sorry.
I just feel like, you know what, if they're going to buy a brewery, on the label of every can should have an Anheuser-Busch logo somewhere.
Well, certainly
I think like that's fair, right? That should
well-
be like, hey, we're the parent company. They should be proud of it, you'd think.
So here's something you
But
can
they know
look-
better.
Yeah. So here's something you can look for. If you see that logo with the upside down bottle, you know that's not owned by Anheuser-Busch or any other larger company,
Right.
because
Oh, I didn't know that.
that little logo is from the Craft Brewing Association, not to be confused with the one there, and that it should be on that Sam Adams, unless that's
It's probably on the 12
I don't
pack
know.
actually.
Yeah, it probably is. I was looking to see. There it is. It's on. Here's the Dream Theater
Oh,
can.
yeah, look at that.
That
let me point
that
that right
little
at that
logo.
camera.
That little logo. When you see that, that's a part of the Craft Brewers Association,
there
and
it
you can't
is.
belong to that if you're big beer. So there you go.
So that label makes a difference, but I really do think that the big beer should be putting, if you're Anheuser-Busch and you're proud to be Anheuser-Busch, you should put Anheuser-Busch on Carbach. You should put Anheuser-Busch on everything they own.
Well, it's kind of like, think about it this way. It's like the big monstrous machine radio company that buys the cool little rock station. The cool little rock station, even though they're now owned by the big, monstrous machine company, they're going to still try to keep their identity as separate as possible.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because the people who are interested in it aren't going to like it as much if they find out that it's a big corporation.
But now,
thing.
remember those AC/DC songs and those Zeppelin songs that weren't the same three that every other company plays?
Yeah.
Now those aren't allowed to be played. Now it's only those three again and heavy rotation.
To your point about the beer.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, since we've talked beer so much, should we go to the Pie Assassin next?
Pie Assassin.
We're going to go back to the Trincheri, to the vermouth, but I'm wondering, is that going to be okay after the beer, or should we go first?
No, I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You
So
have some
you need cups? Yes, I can pass them over. The Pie Assassin is there's not a whole lot of information on it. It's from Anchorage Brewing, which we've had Anchorage beers on before. They're a very well-known, well-respected brewery from Anchorage, Alaska. But on Pie Assassin, I thought it doesn't really say a whole lot about the beer.
I could smell those hops.
Oh,
when I
yes,
passed
for
that
sure.
by.
It doesn't say that much about the beer, but what it does say is on the cans, it says, "Watch your back, Jean," or Jean. I don't know which way they intended for it to be.
Gene?
Yeah, watch your back, Jean.
Gene.
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
Anybody that's familiar with Anchorage and knows is that the brewmaster's name? Like, where did that come from? Obviously,
That is
it means
literally
something.
the only thing it says.
It's the only thing
the
on there.
on here.
So, but as Michael mentioned, you can smell the hops on this pretty much immediately, and boy,
hops and like banana, like from a mile away.
it's got a certain pie sort of a quality to it, actually.
Yeah, it's got just from the nose, it has that. I can tell it already is going to have that that resinous kind of hoppy pine coney thing going on.
No, you know what? I got to tell you, it really
Smells like
doesn't.
it, though.
It really doesn't. It's got enough of the juicy to it that it kind of cancels that on the finish.
It's like a lemon meringue pie.
Yeah, I smelled.
You're absolutely
lemon
right.
bars.
And in fact, that's kind of what if you take
lemon
a close up look at the can, that does look like little lemon meringue pies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So they knew what they were doing. Pie Assassin.
It also, oddly enough, kind of retains that. When beer's being made, you get that wort smell in the brewery. It maintains that, which is not a bad thing. It actually, I really
that
enjoy
smells
it.
great. I love it when you're even close to a brewery and you start smelling that. It smells so good.
What was I saying earlier in the show about lemon meringue? Oh, I was saying lemon meringue whiskey. Yeah, that wouldn't work.
No.
But this
lemon meringue beer actually
lemon meringue IPA is working pretty well. Yeah. So you're not getting any of that resinous stuff, are you, Ian?
There's a little bit of it in the bitter, but there's kind of a sweetness that lays right over top of it. And it's interesting because the way it hits the palate, like you get that bitter when you swallow, but the bitter's kind of in the middle, and then it's followed up by a little bit of sweetness, which just rounds it right off.
So this has some of that.
So it doesn't leave a lingering bitterness.
Yes. So this has some of that juicy, hazy IPA vibe to it. But what makes it very different from most of those that I've tasted is it doesn't go citrus, it doesn't go mango, it doesn't go pineapple. It goes meringue, lemon meringue. Yeah. It's very interesting.
It's so weird how it's bitter and then the sweetness just.
And see, I love that because I love that bitter taste in beer, but I don't always like it on the finish, on the aftertaste. Depending on, what the beer is.
I like it if it leaves me stuck with it.
Right.
That feeling of like now I got this.
Have y'all ever had Green Flash Palate Wrecker?
I'm familiar.
I feel like we've done Green Flash Palate.
I drank Palate Wrecker. And then I drank 4 or 5 other IPAs, and I could still taste
the palate.
Oh, yeah.
Still taste it.
Thus the name, I guess.
Yeah, it was aptly named.
Thus the name. Huh, fascinating. Well, I'm going to give this a big thumbs up. I like this a lot.
I'm going to give it a thumbs up because it's so darn interesting. I don't know that, I'm not big on IPAs in general.
We know
so
this.
I don't know that this would be a go-to, but it's so darn interesting.
I'm loving it.
I kind of want to drink some more of it. I don't know if I'd go for a second glass, but I'd probably enjoy a glass of it.
What's the ABV on that one?
The 6.8,
6.9, 6.4. Okay, yeah, very interesting. Well, I'm gonna give it a big IPA thumbs up. I'm the IPA guy.
The more I drink it, the more I like it. I think that's the theme today, with the beers, because the other beer was like that too. It's like at first it was like maybe, and then the more I drink it, the more I like it.
I was kind of that way with the vermouth too. The more I drink it, the more I like it.
In the dry vermouth defense, I kind of like that right from the first sip.
Yeah.
The
fair
sweet
enough.
vermouth I can smell and have been smelling since
Well,
you poured this.
and we've got this poured already, so this is
This is what I pictured, by the
right.
way,
This is more what your expectations were
when we say vermouth. This is
Right.
at least
exactly.
based on.
Right. So, like we were talking about earlier, Carpano Antica really brought back
There's that
vermouth.
really raisiny thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you got a lot of baking spice where
Much, yes.
yeah, so you're going to, this is this is made, so we call our vermouth Rosso. And in order to call a vermouth Rosso, it has to be made with an Italian varietal. So we make ours with Barbera and with Chardonnay. Barbera we get out of Amador County, which is foothills of the Sierras, and the Chardonnay wine that we use comes out of Napa. It's fortified with brandy, and it's got 19 different herbs and botanicals. Again, Artemisia or Roman wormwood, cinchona bark. This one you're going to have, ginger root. You're going to have whole clove. You're going to have cinnamon, nutmeg. So much more herbaceous, robust, but you have that sweetness. One of the things that I've heard Bob Trinchero say about vermouth is that it should be a medley across the palate. You should get sweetness, you should get bitterness, you should get herbaceousness, but then sweetness should come back into it. And with our Rosso, you definitely get that. It's for making classic cocktails like a Boulevardier. It has just good balance that can work with bourbon or rye that you're using. I mean, as we know, ryes have a real spicy character to them. This works really well with rye. Bourbon has a sweeter character, works really well with bourbon. So having that ability,
It has that versatility. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Well, this is to me, this smells very Italian, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
The
can go with
smell
that.
makes me think of like
Amaro.
wormwood is,
right. Yes,
The wormwood is strong in this one compared to the other one.
the wormwood
I
is
sense-
strong, young
I sense
Skywalker.
much wormwood in this one. The wormwood is strong with this one. No, this is much bigger and much more obvious, especially on the end of the palate, on the aftertaste. The baking spices used. This tastes like the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Oh, that's a great. I really like that.
Like that's what this tastes
Yeah.
like.
It's holiday season.
Very much so, and I can see many drinks being made with this, and not to mask these flavors, but to enhance these flavors.
Well, you know
Right.
what's interesting?
sorry about that.
What's interesting is, again, how palatable the whole thing is. How easy it is to, I find myself saying the same thing I said about the dry, which I did not think I would necessarily say about vermouth, which is I'd love to just have a little glass of this to just sit and sip on for a while.
All right, now
Yeah.
forgive my ignorance here, but I have a friend who mulls wine, and this has some of those same. And maybe it's
Well, that's the
spices
It's
used.
spices. That's
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what it is.
This has a lot of those same characteristics.
Those baking
Yes.
spice
Right, yeah.
sort of sensations.
and the smell of I was sitting here trying to go. I smell that raisiny. I smell those spices. Like, what does that remind me of? And it reminds me of like every Christmas or
Right.
holiday I go over to his house.
reminds
and
me
he's-
of Mama's kitchen.
He's got the pot on the stove and he's making
Yeah,
his
he's making a
mulled
mulled
Right,
wine,
right,
yeah.
and that's just giving off that
That's-
aroma
yeah,
that takes the whole house
And
over,
there's
right?
a lot of the other thing it makes me think of is there's a lot of potpourris that are made to smell
Right.
very similar to
Right.
this. This is very authentic. I will say this is interesting. I bet it's great in a lot of drinks. I like the dry vermouth by itself.
Right.
This
Right.
one I can appreciate what it's doing. I think
you want it in a cocktail.
I think I want to try it in a cocktail or
Right.
some other ways that cut the intensity
Well,
a
this-
little bit.
Yeah.
This has an awful lot of different flavor profiles going on to add to that cocktail.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you could change some other spirits up dramatically by
Correct.
adding a little bit of this.
I can see this doing this with a not so juniper heavy gin, and adding a splash of this to just give it a lot of liveliness to it. This would, if you put this in a gin martini, would become the flavor of the martini entirely, and actually
Right.
not be, I think, a bad thing either, because the gin would probably cut this enough to spread the interesting flavors out a little bit
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I've made martinis with the splash of vermouth, and I've made them without, which are the ones that I like to call really, really cold vodka or really, really cold gin, because that's essentially what they are. Without going, unless you're making like a chocolate martini or something like that. But if you're just making a regular martini with a lemon twist or a regular dirty, the only thing you're adding is that little twist of lemon or that little bit of olive juice, unless you're putting some vermouth in there.
I'm going to brag on my linguistic skills for a minute, but I think martini directly translates into big ass shot.
I think you may be right. Oh, and I found out something else. In Spanish, the way you say martini is la martini.
Oh.
Yeah, so you may want to,
You, sir. You're catching up on the linguistics here.
Very good.
This show covers a lot of territory. It's not just spirits and cigars and beers. It's,
Well, now it's vermouth.
Linguistics. Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, and you're the first vermouth that we tried on the show, and this is really interesting.
I just tried the bourbon after trying the vermouth, and it brings out so much more of the traditional bourbon flavors after you try this. But I'm going to try something interesting here because
don't get too crazy. I don't know if we can handle this.
You said it would go with bourbon, so I'm going to put just a splash in there and see what happens.
I would try that, but I actually don't have any of the bourbon left.
What happened? You used to be cool, Cruz. You've changed.
Yes, I have.
Got the sound effects going on.
It was right about the time I ran out of the bourbon. All right, so you dripped a little bit in there. What do you think, sir?
It adds a level of complexity to the bourbon that's a little crazy, actually. It's pretty interesting.
Well, I've just gone back.
So
I didn't
see,
mix them, but I've just gone back and forth.
This together with a splash of ice and maybe a little suds would be pretty amazing just by itself.
Yeah.
I think you described it really well when you said if you go from the Rosso Vermouth and you go back to the bourbon, you get that more traditional bourbon. The more traditional bourbon flavors are what comes through. Less of the sort of creamier honey type flavor, more of just that traditional bourbon. It's really interesting.
It makes the aroma of the bourbon really interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
It adds like just multiple layers. And I only put a tiny splash in there, but it adds,
know what it smells like?
What's
it smells
that?
like the wrapper on a cigar. The out smells like that dry tobacco.
It does have a little bit of. It has a very. What's the word I'm looking for? They're like musty's not the word.
It's like when you walk into a humidor.
Dank?
A little bit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it has that kind of really nice. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
All right. I tell you what. I don't know how this is going to work because we've kind of gone to the four corners of the palette here with this show.
Today.
We are all over the place today. But when we come back, we're going to be trying a raspberry Belgian Imperial Stout.
Well, that's not totally different or anything.
No, not at all. So I don't know how this is even going to work, but we'll come back to it. Forefathers Brewing Raspberry Heavy Hitter, their Belgian-style Imperial Stout coming up. And all right, we'll very quickly do the 10 points of Cigar Lounge etiquette because there's someone out there that needs to hear these.
Why are you staring at me?
Oh, no, it's not you.
He just wants to tell his experience,
not
which
you.
I'm curious
Yeah.
about.
Is it because I just chew the end off my cigars?
Yeah. And, my favorite.
Or I lick the entire cigar to make it moist?
And
I've seen both
then
of
when
these
you're
things
about to
happen,
leave,
though.
you walk over to where other people are sitting and you smash your cigar out in the ashtray.
And just keep smashing?
Yeah, and just keep smashing. Yeah. All right, we'll be right back with those 10 points and a little Imperial Stout.
Why are you looking at me like that? I brought my own cigar.